Part of the south part of the building was damaged heavily. There was a big hole in the building on the whole corner of the side of the building on the south side. There's a big hole in the building that looks like it was coming from either the 12th or 14th floor all the way down, and it got wider as it got lower. And you could see part of the building is bowed out a little bit. It was, to me, that's major structural damage. In fact, I see a spandrel sticking into the part of number 7 here, right here. And there's smoke on a lot of floors on the south side of the building. And I saw fire coming out some of these windows. And that, through my experience of taking fire photography for the last 30 years, to me that's an indication of extremely heavy fire condition and a dangerous fire condition.
The architect, Richard Gage, is not impressed. He says the smoke on the south side may not be from Tower 7 at all.
This is indicative of a negative pressure which drew the smoke from the World Trade Center 6 or 5 that was burning quite severely. So if that photo was of smoke, it would have to be coming from every window. But there was no fires from every window, and right around the corner where the smoke stops, there's no fires, and there's no visible flames in any of that smoke. So it appears to not be coming from World Trade Center 7.
It was from number 7. The smoke was coming out of the building, not going from the opposite direction. That's insane. It was coming out of the windows. You see it on the video, you see it in the still pictures. There was heavy smoke, numerous floors had fire on it.
And Steve Spack filmed fires not just on the south side, but also on the other sides as the fires spread.
You see windows popping and falling. See a window come out, and it drops and hits the floor. Boom, you know, the window, the glass. And it's moving from window to window, and that's what fire does. It's going to travel. It was windy that day. I'm sure that fed the fire, that, you know, the oxygen got in there, and that fire just took off.
Another fireman who was there that day is clear about what he witnessed.
We saw the fire and the smoke on the south side of Building 7. A lot of damage, a lot of damage. And the smoke, tremendous amount of smoke. I couldn't tell what floor it ended at.
And he also saw the east side of Tower 7.
The windows on approximately 10th to 15th floor of Building 7 started to fail from the heavy fire inside. We looked at it and said, there's so much fire in this building, nobody's going to put this fire out.
Then after being told there was nothing more they could do to save Building 7, he walked away and witnessed its collapse.
We heard it sounded like a jet engine, and we looked over the buildings, you could see the top of Building 7, and it just started to shake and then just disappeared down. And it was down in about 7 or 8 or 9 seconds. It was just gone. I saw the fire, I saw the damage, and that was good enough for me. I never heard any charges, I never heard any sequence of explosions, timed explosions. And I never heard anyone talk about that until a long time later.
In the last few years, the scale of the alleged conspiracy has grown and grown. Not just the government and foreign intelligence, but police, fire service, and even the media.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard.
Where did CNN and BBC get their information, especially considering the building was still standing directly behind their reporters?
Well, I think you have to put it in the context of what was an incredibly chaotic day for everybody involved in trying to cover the story. The investigations we've carried out suggest very strongly that we were working on the basis of an incorrect news agency report. We had this statement from Reuters. It came sometime after our original inquiries, actually, but what it says is, on September the 11th, 2001, Reuters incorrectly reported that one of the buildings at the New York World Trade Center, 7 WTC, had collapsed before it actually did. The report was picked up from a local news story and was withdrawn as soon as it emerged that the building had not fallen.
Do you think that's suspicious?
Not really. I didn't even really, to be honest with you, I didn't even want to put that line in. But, you know, I'm not the only person on the team. I do think it's a little embarrassing on both the part of CNN and BBC.
Even more embarrassing, the BBC lost key tapes of its 9/11 coverage. But we found them. It turned out they'd been put back on the wrong shelf. 2002 rather than 2001. Cock-up rather than conspiracy.
Our correspondent, Jane Stanley.
What of the reporter herself? She's never talked about this before. Jane Stanley was a world affairs specialist and had just arrived in New York. The BBC quickly found a place to interview her, but she had precious little information to go on.
I was thrown, not a question, but a statement of fact. I don't know where that came from.
Jane, what more can you tell us about its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy.
I mean, it's very, very difficult being in that position where you've got no communications, no access to information, and that just comes out of left field.
Details are very, very sketchy.
It was very upsetting about a year ago because of the level of persecution and the virulence in which I was spoken about. And it's just very unfortunate that this whole conspiracy, kind of, I think, rather ridiculous situation has grown out of what's really a very small and very honest mistake.
Well, unfortunately, I think we've lost the line with Jane Stanley.
The BBC says there's a simple explanation for the interview ending abruptly. The satellite feed had an electronic timer, which cut out at 5:15 exactly.
This is the Alex Jones Show on News Radio 590 KLPJ.
Boom, there's a huge explosion. There's dead people all over the lobby, and the cops are saying, don't look at them, because remember, they say nobody died. But, folks, we have them. This is so huge.
Every word used by eyewitnesses is picked over in a relentless search for a hidden truth. Conspiracy talk shows and websites seized on an interview for loose change with a crucial witness, Barry Jennings. There's no evidence that anyone died in Tower 7 on 9/11. But did Barry's interview suggest something else?
The amount of detail that Barry gave us in this interview is unreal. He says he was stepping over dead bodies in the lobby.
Trouble is, Barry Jennings himself disagrees with their interpretation of his words.
I didn't like the way, I was portrayed. They portrayed me as seeing dead bodies. I never saw dead bodies.
Lobby had nice escalators.
But Dylan Avery has a recording of his interview, and he's unrepentant.
And the firefighter that took us down kept saying, do not look down. And I kept saying why. He said, do not look down. And we're stepping over people. And you know you can feel when you're stepping over people. That's how...
I didn't take anything out of context.
I said it felt like I was stepping over them, but I never saw them. And, that's the way they portrayed me, and I didn't appreciate that, so I told them to pull my interview. Do I think that our government would do something like that to its people? No. I honestly don't believe that. Well, I know that I was in there, heard what I heard, saw what I saw.
In New England, the claims of the mysterious melted steel from Tower 7 has been unraveled. It was found by fire protection engineer Professor Jonathan Bonnet in a salvage yard.
It came from a much larger beam. This was the size of steel that they used in the construction of Tower 7. They didn't use this particular kind of steel in Towers 1 or Towers 2. So that's why we know its pedigree. It was a surprise to me because it was so eroded and deformed, and so we took it for analysis in the lab.
Well, it was attacked by what we determined was a liquid slag. When we did the analysis, we actually identified it as a liquid containing iron, sulfur, and oxygen. You can see what it does is it attacks the grain boundaries, and this bit would eventually have fallen out, and it would continue the attack.
Professor Sisson says it didn't melt, it eroded. The cause were those very hot fires and the debris after 9/11 that cooked the steel over weeks. The sulfur came from masses of gypsum wallboard that was pulverized and burnt in the fires.
I don't find it very mysterious at all. That if I have steel in this sort of a high temperature atmosphere that's rich in oxygen and sulfur, this would be the kind of result I would expect.
The way official bodies have investigated Tower 7 at the World Trade Center makes some people think they're hiding something. The first inquiry into Tower 7 by FEMA said the building collapsed because intense fires had burned for hours, fed by thousands of gallons of diesel stored in the building. But it said this had only a low probability of occurrence, and more work was needed. Critics point out that was 6 years ago. Shyam Sundar has studied the